everyone, and welcome to Thorough Newspaper Analysis, which is brought to you by LawSikho. So today we'll be discussing one article at length, which is from the Indian Express. So it is titled as Canary in the Coal Mine. Basically, this article talks about expanding the economic growth in our country, but at what expense are we doing it? We'll be discussing in here. So basically, the wages of the poor laborers and the workers are at stake, and how far is this feasible for the economic growth will be discussed in here. And secondly, we have obviously our news and flash column wherein we'll be discussing the small and crisp news points that are more important for our prelims exam. So if you're also preparing for judicial services examination, you can have a look at the lot of the courses, which is the judiciary test prep course from LawSikho. So this is a very nicely drafted course for all the judicial services aspirants with amazingly drafted classes and syllabus and notes as well. The link to this course is there in the description box below, and you can also download free study material from there. Also, the PDF of this discussion will also now be available on our Telegram group, and the link is also there in the description box. We have various other courses as well, like CLAT, All India Bar Exam, Judgment Writing, etc. You can look at them too. With this, let's see what is the multiple choice question for the day. Artificial sun, recently seen in news, is a nuclear fusion plant of India, China, USA, or Norway. So if you know the answer, you can jot it down in the comment section below. This is the descriptive question for the day. Discuss how economic strength within a country determines its global position in the economic order. So how, like when a country is strong within its own territory in the economic sense, how does it determine its global position as in terms of the economic order or in the economic world? So with this, let's discuss the article for the day, which talks about recovery at the expense of wages. So the economy of India has seen a much stronger recovery last quarter than previously envisioned. So basically, as we know that we always try to make predictions for the coming quarter. As I have already told you, by quarter we mean that we have divided the entire year into 4 quarters. So basically every month has 3 quarters. So that is how we try to analyze and we try to understand the differences that come in the economic scenario from one quarter to another quarter. So as it was predicted for the previous quarter, this quarter, but it has seen a better movement, a better economic growth as it was already envisioned. So basically the GDP contracted by 7.5% in financial year 2021. So it is predicted that the overall GDP would contract by 7.5% in the financial year 2021. It is, and this prediction has been made by the Reserve Bank of India. But now, if at all we are to see that on what expense or on what base are we trying to make the economic growth is something that we need to consider ourselves with. So like we have implications of cutting expenses by corporates on wages and employment. Now, very simple thing that we can understand in here is that, for example, you, I, or anybody is working for any particular firm. Now, be it like a proper organized labor or unorganized labor or any kind of work employment for which we are being paid. But now obviously, since the market is not at its fullest growth, so definitely the demand of particular goods and services has also reduced. Definitely, like let's take a very simple example, like for example, just take a very let's take a very common example of, say, computer services. So whenever the functions are going on normally, the schools, the cyber cafes, and everything is working properly and in the normal scenario, then definitely there is a greater requirement of the professionals or the people who are more equipped with the computer services. But now, since there had been such a long term lockdown, and people are mostly working from their homes, and such offices, cyber cafes are not really opening up, so that is why the demand for such people who are working for the computer services has reduced. Though yes, the reliance on technology has increased, but more or less people have started doing it on their own rather than hiring people for doing their stuff. Now, in such a scenario, obviously, the people who are working in this field for computer services, either they would be paid very less by their employers, or they will be simply retrenched or fired by their employers. Now, in such a scenario, the money can be saved. Yes, of course, the corporate or the firm will be able to save some money, but at what expense is that firm able to do that? At the expense of hiring the people, ultimately increasing the unemployment and also poverty amongst the people who were earlier getting good amount of money from these companies. So that is why we need to understand that what are the implications of cutting the expenses by the corporates on the wages and the employment of all the people who were earlier getting the wages as well as were employed under such corporate bodies. So let's understand the impact on the labor market. So the household demand for Manrega remains very elevated. Now, because obviously we have seen since the time of lockdown, the demand for employment under Manrega. Now, as you know that what Manrega it is the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. So now, as the name itself is suggesting, this particular scheme of the government, this act of the government, it provides at least minimum 100 days employment to the people who are enrolled under it, and thus they are able to get some amount of money in the exchange of the work that they perform. Now, since we know that other private sectors have not been very promising since the time lockdown has taken up, and also since the time economic crunch has been seen in the country, that is why there was huge, and even till date there is huge demand for Manrega jobs. But the government obviously is trying to accommodate all the people, but since the demand is very high, it is still getting elevated, and since private sectors are not offering good incentives and not even jobs in many situations, the Manrega has to face a lot of burden and stress on itself. So due to which a significant labor market slack has been seen in the labor market. So the employment, second thing, employment income has contracted in nominal terms in 2020. So basically, as we know that the employment income, because when people are not at all employed, so firstly, if they have no employment at all, they will not be getting any income, obviously. And if at all they are employed, so their salaries have been cut down. So due to which the income of the people has contracted, and there is a very beautiful relationship between the income of the people and demand made by the people. I'll give you a very simple example to this as well. For example, you have 10,000 rupees in your hand and you have nothing, significant to spend on. You have paid all your dues, you have paid your rent, you have paid for your electricity supply, food, etc. Now, all this money that you have in hand of 10,000 rupees is merely something that you can spend on shopping or say buying anything, any luxury item or anything that you wanted to buy. Now, just imagine a situation that will or you not would you or you not spend this money into buying something? Of course, we would. Like maybe not the entire amount of 10,000 would be spent on buying something, but yes, at least 2, 3,000, 4,000 rupees we might spend on buying a particular thing. So, which means when we have increased income, we tend to demand more from the market and we tend to spend more in the market through shopping or buying stuff like that. But just imagine that you have only an only amount of 5,000 rupees, out of which you also have to pay your dues, your rent, you have to take care of your food, transportation, etc. Now, the amount of money that you have in hand is very limited. So, would you be able to spend it on other kinds of demands that you would put in the market? Obviously not, or with very difficulty. So that is why, due to the income that has been decreased, the demand has also decreased ultimately in the market, due to which the producers are not getting the incentive to produce anything new, due to which an entire cycle of, this vicious cycle is formed, due to which the economy gets trapped and the growth is not be able to take place. So now, just as I just said, that the income has also decreased income has also affected the demand and has also made it weak. So in every firm, if every firm pursues the strategy of boosting profits by cutting employee compensation, so definitely the demand will be weak. With the similar example that I gave you, like for example, there were 10 employees who were working for a firm who used to get, for example, 1 lakh rupees per employee every month. So they had good amount of income in their hands, so they used to demand more and spend more in the market. So the producers used to produce more. But now these very 10 people are only getting rupees 50,000 in their hand, of which they have to take care of a lot of expenses from. So that is why this will tend to get a weaker demand from their side, and thus a weaker production and thus a weaker economy. So that is why weak demand disincentivizes rehiring, and that is why this makes an entire cycle of problems. So as we know, here is a small description as to how GDP is calculated. So there are two, major ways, like for the sectoral production side and functional expenditure side. But then there is also a third way through income side, as we just discussed. So basically, GDP, the gross domestic product, is simply the sum of profits, wages, and indirect taxes. But this is too much into the concept of economy. So here we need to understand that there is a dent on the private consumption, like it will result in incomplete global recovery in 2021, because obviously, as I said, it will be a complete cycle which will be very difficult to break if at all we are not trying to increase the income that is given to the employees. and then it would weaken the export prospects, because as I said, not unless the manufacturing or the economic setup of a country is strong from within, it will definitely not be able to compete on the global market, in the global market, and thus it will not be able to find a good and strong position in the global order. And it's also no imperative for the entrepreneurs to invest, because obviously if your market is not something that is promising and through which you can get better gains in return, there will be no incentive or imperative for any entrepreneur or any person to invest into your market. And even the foreign direct investment, that is the investment that comes from the outer countries or the foreign countries, would also be reduced. So here are some steps that are needed. We need to increase public investment, because obviously the government has been trying to do this, but we need to even push it further, so that the more and more money is there in the market, so that more and more demand is driven through this money. We should try to create jobs, boost demand, crowd in private investment, and improve competitiveness, because obviously if we have these feelings of competitiveness, etc., then it is always better. So these would definitely help in the betterment of the entire economic culture of the nation. And then we need to shift from monetary to fiscal policy. So the latter is more surgical instrument to target, and also it actually what happens is that it the SMEs and the labor market too. So basically what we need to do is that we need to push in more money into the market, but that has to be done with very careful steps have to be taken in this direction. So basically this is the fiscal policy and this is the monetary policy. Fiscal policy actually does change in government spending and tax rates, and monetary policy changes in the interest rates and money supply. So that is why we need to focus to fiscal policy, and we need to make or increase the role played by the government in this direction. With this, let's see what do we have for news in flash today. China's artificial sun. So recently, China has successfully powered up its artificial sun nuclear fusion reactor for the first time. Please remember, it is the fusion reactor and not the fission. As we know that nuclear reactions are of two types, fusion and fission. So this one is a fusion reactor. So the name is HL2M tokamak reactor, is China's largest and most advanced nuclear fusion experimental research device, and it is called as artificial sun because of the enormous heat it generates. So a lot of energy can be gained through this artificial sun project of China. So basically, the reactor can reach a temperature of over, just imagine, 150 million degrees Celsius, which is 10 times hotter than the core of the sun. So just imagine that what amount of heat can be produced through this nuclear reactor. So this was all for the day. We hope it was a good session for you. Thank you so much for staying tuned with LawSikho.